And we're live with another SEO leadership webinar. Today we have Will. He is the owner of Very Good SEO. How are you today, Will?
I'm good, thank you.
Good to hear. Good to hear. And yes, we're just going to jump straight into this one. So, the first question I would have, and I would like to speak about, would be about motivation within leadership. So, what qualities would you say a leader requires in order to motivate a team? From your experience and past experience in leading teams, what would you say qualities that stand out in order to keep a team motivated?
I think you really have to care about what you're doing, obviously. Like there's a certain element of, I work on my own stuff now, which, I own. There's always a certain element of, if you're working for a company or whatever that you don't own, there's always going to be a sort of background element of kind of maybe you want to do your own thing. But I think one thing that's really important is like understanding the problems and being quite clear about that, particularly if it's a client-based relationship. If you're working agency side, you can have several clients. There's always going to be problems. There's always going to be issues that the team might have, clients might have. Even if you've got everything kind of really well oiled, there's always going to be something. And I think being able to kind of acknowledge that and understand that you are doing stuff to tackle that, and really kind of getting in, saying like, I care about this issue, and really kind of discussing it with the team. It doesn't have to be in so much detail for juniors, etc. But I think just kind of having that acknowledgement is really important, and it allows us to show that you know as a kind of team, you're taking account of that stuff.
Perfect. Well, and on the flip side of that, you have to sort of maintain confidence whenever you're a leader, for the team to fall in the line and follow your strategy. So, another thing would be, how do you actually maintain confidence when that self doubt, maybe something bad happened, and you're having that self doubt, even imposter syndrome, which everyone would experience at least once. How do you sort of maintain confidence to move forward and guide your team towards that goal?
Yeah, I mean, SEO is in particular an industry that has a lot of contrasting opinions, and you can learn a lot of stuff from various different places. So you will have, not only contrasting opinions within your own company and team, but there'll be a bunch of stuff out there that's contrasting as well. I think showing that because most of the stuff that you learn in SEO is usually through mistakes, like, or you do something really well and it's going really well for a long time, and then suddenly it isn't. And that's when you start to figure out, okay, what do we need to change? And obviously, as you get on in your career, that becomes less and less, and you sort of, you kind of know what to do instinctively from the get-go. But being able to acknowledge that imposter syndrome, even if you do have that as a leader, I think the best way to do that is just by saying, this is what I would recommend, and this is the strategy or tactic that I would go with, but actually I might be wrong. So does anyone else have any ideas? And being able to discuss openly with your team that approach and saying I'm not always right is, do you know what I mean, is a kind of really good approach. It shows that, yeah, you're confident in what you're doing, but also you're still open to change in the long run.
And confident in your team, I suppose, as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Right.
Thanks.
And well, you mentioned there that about mistakes, and especially for junior SEOs, a lot of them get sort of almost too nervous to make mistakes, that they're not really sort of trying out new techniques or tactics. But whenever obviously you were a bit younger, a bit not as much experience, what sort of characteristics did your sort of manager have that sort of really stood out to you, or was there anybody that really let you sort of push the boundaries?
Yeah, I think organization in terms of like deliverables and just, your project management, all that stuff is really, really important, because it's, you've got one side of things, which is, okay, we've agreed to deliver this to a client, or we've agreed to deliver this internally for various goals. You can see all that stuff, but sometimes actually you can be the best managers that I've had have left me to my own accord to actually investigate something, dive into a problem, and maybe even come up with my own way of doing things, as a solution. That doesn't always work, because you obviously sometimes, some people need very, very specific guidance. But I think for the most part, if you actually give people the trust to be able to do that task, leave them to it, and that's generally the approach that I take, is if I'm managing somebody, I don't I don't want to be micromanaging them. And if somebody micromanages me, it drives me insane immediately. So to be able to have a structure that you can see, but still say, go away and do that in your own way. Most, and not all, but most of the work we do in SEO isn't heavily deadline based, right? It's I do some paid marketing as well, and paid marketing is obviously a bit different because you're clicking on and off buttons that start immediately spending money. But with SEO, everything is much longer play, it's much longer term, particularly from a mistakes point of view. So to be able to give that time should be something that, if you've organized your campaigns properly, is an easy thing to do, because you're saying we've given enough time. It's not always the case, but
Yeah,
definitely. Awesome. You were speaking about how your manager gave you a lot of freedom to explore your interests, and in our leadership course as well, one of the things that we speak about is the best way to scare away an A player is to have them be micromanaged. So are there any sort of key characteristics that you would identify within an A player, especially within building your own consultancy now and bringing on people? Would there be any sort of characteristics that you would look for when bringing someone on?
Yeah, I think obviously everyone's got their own skills, and it's a separate conversation really, but looking into those skills and letting people evolve their skills that they actually want to is really important. But I think the main thing that stands out for me, and always has, is somebody's ability to, particularly agency side, because obviously you're working on multiple different businesses and trying to figure out multiple different problems for each one. You've got numerous industries, numerous types of business, product, service, etc. Someone's ability to be able to look at a business and understand the stuff that we're doing outside of SEO and the problems they may have, understand that target user, target customer, the intent behind everything, kind of is a real skill in itself. It's a difficult one to put your finger on, because I did management at uni, and then that in itself had a lot of kind of like different modules. We were doing operations 1 minute, marketing the next, which gave you a big view of everything. But when you're working with clients, to be able to look at their businesses and say, obviously SEO probably isn't their number one priority, so we want to be able to communicate to them as best as possible, to get things done and to get buy-in, trust. But to be able to look at their business and say, actually, this is the daily thing that they're doing. Like, they might be working from a warehouse that's got a small office in it, and they've got things that they're dealing with on a daily basis that you, as an SEO, never have to deal with. Talking to delivery drivers, a simple example. Like things like that, where I think that's a really important skill. And for somebody to be able to almost like grab a website and just shove it into a tool, whether that's SEMrush or Ahrefs or whatever it is, and have a half an hour play around and kind of understand immediately, okay, this is what these guys do, and this is some of the problems they may face. Like, that kind of underpins the actual SEO strategy, because a thing I bang on about all the time is like, SEO isn't just SEO anymore. It's so many more things within the business that you have to get right for it to work, to get people to trust you. So yeah.
And just on the topic of trust and communication, one thing that we sort of realized from talking to candidates going into a managerial position would be sort of communication internally between different departments. So you have your paid, and there's obviously the row over budgets. Maybe one has bigger budget, but to effectively move a business forward altogether, everyone has to work together in sweet harmony with the same goal in their strategy. So do you have any sort of, I don't know, tips on how to effectively internally communicate between different departments, just to ensure that you're all working together for the business goal, opposed to competing to see which one's better?
Yeah, I think training is really important in terms of actual SEO training. Like the particularly for an internal team in a large company, you've got to get buy-in and work across different types of teams, some of which will never touch SEO. But I think it's still important for most teams to have a basic understanding of what you do, because I think a lot of the time SEO is seen as like this still, I don't, weirdly, I don't know why, but it's still kind of seen as this kind of geeky dark art thing, where actually it's not really anymore. It's not, that's not the way that I would approach any campaigns anymore. Used to be years and years ago. But to be able to show people actually what you do on a regular basis and help them understand, and then to be able to sort of package up your goals as best you can if you're trying to get buy-in. So really trying to relay your efforts and how they're going to actually impact business goals. It's like forecasting isn't entirely, it's a work of fiction, but if you can get it as close as possible, that means that you're going to have better buy-in, and therefore, communication, I think, is just helping people understand what you're actually doing as a team is really, really important. And sometimes that's as simple as just doing internal courses regularly and, making that knowledge available for people, even if it's a half an hour, 45-minute course on the basics. That can be really important.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And within keeping on the theme of communication, not in an internal aspect, but rather an external thing, you lightly touched on cross-department or just client-facing as well. Do you have any tips on how you best communicate SEO goals over to clients or across departments and have them sort of buy into the goals and the mission for your team?
Yeah, I think generally in-house you will have you'll have regular reporting which you get involved with. So hopefully you should have a place where you can actually show that your progress on a regular basis, whether it's a sort of QBR or operations meeting or whatever that is. Clients are a lot more intense and more difficult, because obviously they're kind of relying on you as an external company to help them with their goals, and it's really important to be able to show them the bigger picture on a regular basis. But one thing I'm not a fan of is giving out kind of dashboards and things like that, where and I know it can be useful for clients to be able to see data quickly whenever they need to. But I think it's also really important to sit down with clients on a regular basis, at least once a month, and say, here's what we've been doing, here's how it's going, even if it's kind of the same stuff, because a lot of the time you're doing the same stuff every month because it's a long-term campaign. But to be able to sit down with them and get some time in with them and really communicate with them, get them to ask any questions that they might have, and just be super clear about what you're doing and the results that you've achieved, rather than sort of constantly contacting them on a regular basis. I do work with clients who I have WhatsApp groups with and Slack and things like that. And those are okay to ask questions about the kind of doing part. But when you actually need to, report back, it should be a more formal, give them a report. They want to see everything in one place, and it helps them to digest in that sort of, otherwise they'll just see a bunch of stuff going on and not really know how it's impacting the overall picture.
Do you spend more time within, say, for a once a month meeting, using your terminology and helping inform them on how your business works? Or do you sort of adapt your language and your terminology to better suit them?
A bit of both. I do try as much as possible to, generally I'll probably work with marketers the most, like I'll work with marketing teams, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the business owner directly, who sometimes won't even have a kind of basic understanding of like e-commerce terms, or they're more operational, so they don't really see the digital side of things, for instance. So I try as much as possible to educate the client on what I'm talking about. Even if it's something technical, I'll try and condense that into some, an easily understood definition of something, and usually give an example of, okay, you're a user, this happens. Why is it annoying, or why is it good? Just to give them a specific example, and they don't always care, but to be able to give some context is really important.
Awesome.
Definitely.
Cool.
And well, I know you mentioned just before we came on live, I don't know if you can go into too much detail or if you want to go into too much detail, but obviously you own Very Good SEO. You mentioned that you're going to try and maybe bring on a few people, maybe start of next year. Is there a thought process there, whether you want to start from maybe the top down, bring on somebody more senior, or bring in somebody that you maybe want to take under your wing and train up? Is there a thought process there?
Yeah, agencies are difficult ones because, you know, you get to a point where everybody wants something more than what they have currently. So you need to take that into account. I think be realistic, really. Like, everyone's going to want to have everyone's got career aspirations that they're going to want to achieve. So bringing on extremely junior people and training them up is a very good approach if you know what you're going to give that person and you've got quite a clear plan for them, and you're not just dumping work on them because, you know, they're new and they're junior and you expect them to do it. On the flip side, a more senior person can be really, really good resource because, you know, personally, I am probably stronger on the technical side of things, although I do a lot of content work as well. And for me to have somebody who's kind of mid-senior just doing content would be extremely valuable for my business right now. So that would probably be the approach that, like, practically I'd take. But I'd also love to bring on, you know, graduates, people that are kind of really want to get stuck into the industry, because it's always really fun to teach people that stuff. And also they'll have views that I don't have. Like, probably they'll know a lot more about TikTok or something, maybe, you know, that I'm not as good at, because, you know, I'm an old fart now. So
Right. And is there much plans? Is there plans to take on just one or two, or
I don't know yet. It's
this sort of year or so. But
I mean, obviously, the more the merrier. But yeah, gonna have to see how things go.
Perfect.
And maybe it will be something you're going to have to look for within Very Good SEO. But even from past experience, how do you effectively sort of delegate tasks within a team? So set the scene, you're a leader, you've got a team, different strengths. How do you play to their strengths to ensure maximum productivity, but also to ensure growth for the ones that maybe don't have a lot of knowledge around something but want to learn it, and you obviously want to build them up as well? How would you effectively delegate the tasks?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I think are important to be able to do that. I think one of them is basically more time as a team. So I'd like to get the team together, do idea generation, whether that's for content or outreach for links or PR. Just having more people together for shorter sessions where you can go over stuff, understand. That really helps to see who's contributing to what areas, see, you know, as a group, kind of who does what in those meetings as well. And then the other thing is getting a lot of time in with each of your members of staff, but not necessarily one-on-ones, but just as much available time for them to ask questions. And then you can kind of start to understand what they like, what they don't like, what they're good at, what they're not. I've seen more often than not members of staff who are completing tasks that they really don't enjoy, but then they're not doing as much of the other stuff that they do enjoy. So for the delegation side of things, obviously, generally you'd have a kind of plan up front with everything that you need to achieve on a monthly basis, all the kind of practical stuff. I'd look to understand who does what best, and then, you know, by using those techniques to then actually be able to give them the tasks, if that makes sense. So you end up with a kind of, okay, maybe I need to move these tasks to this person who's actually expressed more interest in that. You know, or maybe it's the other way around. They just love doing what they're doing, and that's absolutely fine as well.
Perfect.
Awesome. Just quickly to intervene, one of our comments is asking, how are you preparing clients for the launch of SGE? Everyone's shaking breath.
Yeah, it's a weird one because we don't know really what's going to happen. I think most of the stuff that I've been recommending for years now is still the same with the SGE in mind, like, and AI, etc. Obviously, everyone's talking about it at the moment, but I have focused heavily on the majority of strategies which are based on trust, expertise, as we should be doing as SEOs. And a lot of that comes from creating original things, original opinions, new, like this podcast, for instance. You know, you guys are creating something new. It's your owned media. It's something that is unique. I think that approach, you know, keep doing that is really important. So whatever happens, we've got something that isn't regurgitated. And almost because, you know, a lot of people are very attracted to AI because we can get a lot done with it in a shorter period of time. But actually, most of the content that I've created that's been really successful has been stuff that is completely new opinion, completely new and useful. You know, you're creating something new. You're not kind of just, you know, pulling things that already exist and just shoving them into a different format. So in doing that, I think as best as I know how at the moment, because no one knows really, it's, you know, creating something unique. We're sort of, the way that I put it is, we should be the ones that the AI is referencing at the end of the day. Like, we should be the ones that are creating content and creating brands that people trust for the AI to teach itself on, you know, rather than us using those, using AI to produce something that's already out there, but just kind of, you know, reformat it basically. Specifically from an SGE point of view, obviously we really don't know how kind of intensely Google's going to roll this out to the public, but it's a similar thing. It's like, if we're producing unique content, we ideally want to be shown in those results. But I think also it's massively dependent on the type of business, the type of search, the level of kind of depth and level of time that somebody is going to take to convert based on a product or service. You know, if it's very research heavy, you're probably going to use SGE a lot more as a user. But if it's a simple, really, really quick, you know, I want this now search term, I think we're going to have to rely less on it. So yeah, it's going to be different based on different industries, but roughly the same in terms of make something unique, keep doing that.
Awesome. I actually, this sort of transfers nicely into the next question that I had lined up, which was, have you ever recalled a moment where you or the team as a whole needed to adapt quickly? And could you take us through how it was effectively handled? And in my notes, I added, AI is a hot topic. Business owners can also offer different interesting takes on this. So has there, maybe in the past year, especially with the rise of AI, has that impacted your business, and how, you know, did you adapt into it?
Yeah, I mean, particularly agency side, things constantly change. Clients' requirements change, you know, their budgets, all sorts of things. There's so many variables. And then similarly in-house, you've got to kind of watch what you're doing a bit more closely, because it's, you know, there's all eyes on you a lot of the time. I think a specific example would be for algorithm updates. There's always a lot of noise around the big algorithm updates, the core updates, and often clients will see that, internal teams will see that, and they'll sort of expect something back from it. So my approach to algorithm updates has always been quite a chilled one, to be honest. Like, if we're doing a good job and we're doing what we know works, and generally the algorithm updates that we've had for the past like 5 years haven't really been super specific in terms of the detail they give about what we should and shouldn't be doing. The helpful content update, for instance, we were already doing helpful content, you know, so what do we then do? Well, there's not a huge amount of reactionary stuff we can do and should do as SEOs, because generally as a practice, we're not very reactionary, you know, in the way that we create things. So in that instance, when you do get those kind of algorithm update queries, you have to change in terms of the way you report. So you have to really take into account, okay, maybe a site did drop in revenue, maybe it dropped in rankings. What are the good things out of it? If you know, you can pull out good stories from what you're currently doing, but then also the way that you report becomes a bit more like, we were doing this good stuff before and we should keep doing it, and just kind of reiterating the messages and really making sure that the team can communicate to clients, communicate to internally if they need to, as much as possible, but with control over that as well. Algorithm updates are always a weird one, and they're always something that you need to kind of adapt to. They come out of nowhere. We've had like, I don't know, 100 over the past, it feels like about 100 over the past like 2 months. But we should still do the same stuff that we were doing because we were doing it right. Obviously, if you're not doing it right, then, well, you're not going to be working with me. But, you know, you might need to change some stuff immediately. But generally, it's about how you change the reporting. And I think just giving people the guidelines to be able to say things, you know, in the right way to reassure people in that instance.
Awesome.
Perfect. And well, obviously we come from like the recruitment side of things, so we talk to a lot of candidates who are maybe SEO executives who are just about to make that move up to the management role. I think I went onto your LinkedIn and it said like view maybe your past 19 experiences. So obviously you have a lot of experience moving into maybe a new job role. What advice would you give those people moving into a new management position? What advice would you give them to sort of incorporate into their first 90 days?
That's a good question, actually. I think probably specifically when I did move from exec to manager level, one of the things I didn't do, which I now do and wish I had done, was basically just kind of make a wiki, like document everything. Like as soon as you, particularly from an agency side, because obviously you've got so many moving parts and stakeholders, just basically find a way to document. Something like Notion is perfect for this, but you can just use Google Docs or, you know, whatever you've got. But just basically really take a proper strategic look at everything that's going on and try and document as much of that as possible. And off the back of that, you'll have a list of questions, which hopefully your senior managers will be able to answer for you, but you might have to answer yourself. But just kind of really taking stock of everything and saying, okay, here's all the moving parts, here's what's going on, here's when we do this and that, here's all the clients we've got, really documenting it so that you've got, it's almost like you probably won't really look at it that much, or maybe ever again, but just writing that stuff down and really organizing it in front of you is super, super useful, because it means that when you do come to potentially a client's not happy, or maybe they're super happy and they want to spend even more time, well, then you've got all those notes there to kind of organize and say, well, who's doing what on this, who needs to be involved. Yeah, I think that's probably the main one. And it's a strange one because it's not really a direct sort of, it could probably be applied to a lot of roles, to be honest, but it's something that I started doing later on and really, really helped, especially when you get questions that come out of nowhere and you can refer back to your kind of documentation that you've made and say, here's the strategy for this client. Like, I've got these documents. I don't have to try and search for like version 3 final. I've got everything written down, how I've written it down and how I've understood it, which really helps.
Perfect. I think that's a great one. We haven't heard that before, so I think that's excellent.
Definitely. And well, here's another one. So from candidates I would speak to quite a lot, I wouldn't say scared, I would say imposter syndrome as well, but essentially the next natural progression would be into a management role, and they're sort of like, I'm not sure, I don't know how to lead a team, I'm not sure how to be a manager. So when you first stepped up into that managerial role where you would have that accountability of having a team underneath you, did you naturally know that was the next step and you were able to step up naturally and able to lead, or was it something like completely thrown in the deep end, I'll just learn it as I go along, and then just sort of got all the attributes as you were doing it?
Yeah, I think it was gradual, and I'd been a manager before, not in an SEO company, but I'd had experience managing people on shifts, so that sort of came relatively naturally to me. But definitely, earlier in my career, I didn't really understand how agencies worked, and I guess as I went along, somebody new would join who was more junior to me, and I would start to help them out, and then eventually become sort of their manager. And then when I did step up to a manager role, it's like, okay, here's your direct reports. You're just kind of doing the same thing. I think there was a period where, and this is a long time ago now, but recruiters approached me for a management role, and I didn't go for it because I just thought I'm not at the right stage. And to be honest, I probably could have done the role, but I definitely wouldn't have been as good at it as I was at my next role, which, I was a lot more confident with. So I think there is an aspect of like jump, go for the next thing. But if you definitely feel like you don't want to, that's fine as well. Like take a step back and just, and then maybe that gives you some time to say, well, what skills do I need to develop before I move on to my next role? How long am I going to try and do those in?
Perfect. Well, that flew and that rounds us up at the 30-minute mark, which is crazy. I thought doesn't even feel like being here 5 minutes, but I just want to say thank you again for coming on the webinar. Plenty of golden nuggets there and quite a lot of replies, which we have never had before on the podcast as well. But yeah, we really appreciate it and hope you enjoy your weekend.
Nice one. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, Will.
All the best.